How do your libertarian values specifically affect your decisions as a businessman?
I mean, because I understand the principles that lead to prosperity in society. I understand the importance of property rights. I understand how regulation can harm business. I understand how high tax rates don't work for the good of society. I understand how it's business that's uplifted humanity. We've got some of the statistics in our book that we did in the research. I mean, 200 years ago, 85% of the people alive on the planet Earth lived on less than $1 a day. 85%. Now it's down to 16%. 200 years ago, illiteracy rates across the planet were over 90%. Today they're down to 14%. 200 years ago, the average lifespan was 30. Today it's 68. It's 78 in the United States and 80 in Japan. So business and capitalism is what lifted the world up. And I see that economic freedom is the key to it all. The United States was like the shining light under this whole planet for 100 plus years. And even as little as just 13 years ago in 2000, the Economic Freedom Index, we were still ranked number 3 behind Singapore or Hong Kong and Singapore. Now we fall into number 18. And as our economic freedom declines, so does our prosperity. I mean, we've got unemployment rates of 7.9%. It's higher than that if you count the people who've given up looking. We've got, in the last decade, the income per capita has actually dropped in America for 10 years. And we're in decline. And we're in decline because our economic freedom is being systematically stripped.
Why do you suppose it is? Is it a series of bad leaders who lack foresight, or is it that the public is concerned about doesn't want economic freedom?
It's because the way I see it is the critics of business and capitalism dominate the narrative. They put a narrative out there that business is fundamentally greedy and selfish and exploitative. If you saw the documentary called The Corporation, it portrayed corporations as fundamentally sociopaths. If you live in a society where corporations are sociopaths, you need a really big government to control them. Otherwise, these guys are running amok, wrecking everything and cheating people and dumping their toxins in rivers and ripping off their workers and defrauding the consumers, and it's just a horrible bunch of sociopaths running around. Sociopaths you got to do something about.
For sure.
So the critics dominate the narrative, and then the people that defend capitalism make a huge mistake. They oftentimes will concede the moral high ground, and they'll say, you're right, business is selfish and it's greedy, but because of Adam Smith's invisible hand, that all gets channeled for the collective good. Now, of course, the invisible hand is an amazing insight into the way the world works, but trying to defend capitalism strictly on the basis of the invisible hand and prosperity created while conceding the moral high ground to the opponents and the enemies is a huge strategic mistake. We've got to reframe, we've got to recapture the narrative. And that's what our book tries to do.
And yet we see that. Living in Washington, we see business leaders, CEOs come to this city every day and in effect beg the federal government for more regulation and not make an affirmative case in defense.
Crony capitalism.
So why is that?
Because they don't have a larger perspective of business and they're strictly looking out for their own short-term interest of their enterprise. As government's gotten so powerful, I mean, spending 40% of the GDP of the country now, and a lot of that they don't have. They're just borrowing it or printing it. You end up with a lot of businesses colluding with the government, and you end up with, and that's part of the reason the narrative's been, people don't support capitalism to the same degree they did because they mistake crony capitalism for free enterprise capitalism. They associate business people with corruption. And I mean, just look at the most recent bill that passed when we had the whole fiscal cliff deal. You saw payoffs to well-connected political organizations like Hollywood, like alternative energy, and you've got special deals being cut all the time. And business is going to pursue that. If the government's giving away money, most people are going to line up to get it.
So you're obviously run a huge business, a major employer. What's been your interaction with this administration? Have you been called for your view on things?
No, of course not. You know, almost all my interactions with business, with government, are negative. I mean, whether it be the FTC trying to break up mergers or local health departments setting rules for us, government has a legitimate role to play. I think the big debate we have to have in the 21st century is A, how to limit government, and B, what's the appropriate things government should be doing. We need to, but I think the reason why government's gotten so big is because people have lost confidence in private sector. And I think they've lost confidence because business is no longer not only defending the free market system or free enterprise system, but they've lost their ethical foundation.
Right.
I would argue that when capitalism got started, we had the general milieu was Judeo-Christian ethics. But as we moved to a more secular society, that basis has been undermined, or we've moved to a more secular society, and as a result, things like the Marxist criticism or social Darwinism has undermined the ethical foundation of business. As we say in the book, Adam Smith's book that he thought was his most important work was not The Wealth of Nations, but The Theory of Moral Sentiments, where he put forth a view of human nature that was not strictly self-interested, but cared about what other people thought. And unfortunately, we didn't integrate those two philosophies together. And so we didn't need to 200 years ago because we had Judeo-Christian ethics that underpin the society. Now that we've begun to move away from that, capitalism needs to find a new ethical foundation, or it's just going to be seen as a bunch of sociopaths running around trying to line their pockets.
Correctly, right?
I don't think it'll be seen correctly because business, unfortunately, is judged by its worst actors. It's the only part of society that is, in my opinion. We don't judge doctors. If somebody takes out the wrong kidney, all doctors are not stained by that. Or if even politicians, there's a lot of corruption there, but we don't tend to judge all politicians by the bad work of a few. But business, unfortunately, is stained by the Enrons, the WorldComs, the Bernie Madoffs, and people generalize that to be what all businesses are like. I mean, look at the Gallup's approval rating for big business now is down to 19% approval rating. That means 81% don't approve of big business. And it's very hard to create a free society when business is held in such low esteem.